Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulih al-Kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in amma ba'd. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has truly been very gracious to us by giving us the Holy Quran as our book. The Quran is a book which is unlike any other to ever exist. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses this Quran to convey His message to us in various forms, through various methods. Some of those involve direct instructions, do this, do this, do this. Some involve direct prohibitions, don't do this, don't do this. Some involve giving the reward for certain actions, thereby encouraging us to do them. Some involve explaining the warnings and punishments for certain acts, thereby admonishing us from committing them. One of the other ways that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses to convey messages to us, especially in the forms, especially when the intent is to deliver a lesson, not a direct command or prohibition, is through the use of parables. Parables is, if you want to think of it as a fancy word for a fancy way of saying examples, and they come in different forms in the Quran itself. There are some parables that come that refer to a true story, a true incident, and through that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is delivering some lesson to us, or in most cases various lessons to us. For example, we have in Surah Al-Kahf, وَضْرِبْ لَهُمْ مَثَلَ الرَّجُلَيْنِ جَعْلْنَا لِأَحَدِهِمَا جَنَّتَيْنِ, that give them the example of the two men, we gave one of them two gardens, and it goes on. We're going to talk about that in one of our sessions, inshallah. So that story of the two men was a true story that happened, and through that Allah is giving some lessons, some teachings. We have in Surah Yasin, وَضْرِبْ لَهُمْ مَثَلًا أَصْحَابَ الْقَرْيَةِ إِذْ جَاءَهَا الْمُرْسَلُونَ, give them the example of the people of the village, referring to the ancient city of Antioch. And then there's lessons and teachings that come from there. That too we'll talk about, inshallah. And there are other examples that may not refer to an incident, but through a comparison with something Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala conveys a message. For example, in Surah Al-Baqara, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُم فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ كَمَثَلِ حَبَّةٍ أَنبَتَتْ سَبْعَ سَنَابِلَ فِي كُلِّ سُنبُلَةٍ مِئَةُ حَبَّةٍ. The example of those who spend in the way of Allah is like that of a corn in whose each ear is 100 seeds. Meaning the one who gives for the sake of Allah, the reward for that is multiplied 700 times, just as that corn in total with its ears has 700 seeds. So in examples like those, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not referring to an incident or a story, but He is still giving us a teaching, and to make it easier to facilitate our understanding, He is using an example. And if you just think about this example of the corn and the ears and 700 times, it's much more profound, and it stays in your memory. It's easier to retain than if Allah had just said that if you spend, you get the reward 700 times. And these types of examples come again and again. And in fact, the ones that we're going to talk about today are of this type as well. So inshallah, throughout our sessions, we only have 7 sessions for the rest of this month. So we'll try to cover as many of these parables as we can. There's many, there's countless. There are even others that don't come in any of the 2 types that I gave you, of a referring to an incident or of a comparison. There are many that come just as metaphors. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says something and it's an expression. Like Allahu nuru samawati wal ard. Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. And there's many others like that where it's just a very eloquent use of words, and through that the meaning that is given is much more profound. And inshallah we'll look at some of those as well if time permits. Today, in our short session, our sessions will be short, inshallah, 15-20 minutes on average. And the idea through all of this is just to understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us in the Quran. What is the message? What is a part of the overall message that is coming? Because the Quran is a book that was sent for us as a guidance. Right? In one hadith, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he calls the Quran as-Sirat al-Mustaqim. When in Surah Fatiha, we ask Allah to guide us to the straight path, and then the rest of the entire Quran is the reply to that dua. So to understand the Quran and to be aware of its messages, its teachings, is the true essence of the Quran. Recitation, yes, is important and it carries immense rewards. And it is never something that should be left out for the sake of comprehending. But comprehension of the Quran is something that should be done in addition to recitation. Just as an example of how the Quran speaks to us, we've all seen the phrase Ya ayyuhal ladhina in the Quran, comes again and again and again. You have Ya ayyuhal ladhina kafaru, O you who disbelieve. You have Ya ahlal kitab, O people of the book. You have Ya so and so, Ya so and so. The most you have Ya ayyuhan nas, O people. But the most usage that comes is of Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, O you who believe. And have we ever thought that when we read this verse, it is something that Allah is addressing us directly? Right? There may be some parts in the Quran whose teachings or message is not applicable to us at that point in our life. But when Allah said, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, He's talking to us. And there are exactly 90 times in the Quran that this comes. Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu. Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu. So to understand what the Quran wants from us, what Allah is saying to us, it is vital. It is vital to every Muslim, and it is a crucial part of every Muslim's deen, of every Muslim's faith. And our deen and our understanding of deen and our practicing on deen cannot be complete until we know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to us in the Quran. So these sessions are a meager attempt to bring some of that to light for the benefit of myself and all those who are able to attend. And inshallah, through this, it will hopefully enlighten in us the desire, the yearning to know more of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying in the Quran and how we can apply those teachings and those lessons in our everyday lives. When it comes to the use of examples, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes a statement in Surah Al-Baqara. And He says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَسْتَحْيِي أَن يَضْرِبَ مَثَلًا مَا بَعُوضَةً فَمَا فَوْقَهَا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not shy away from giving any example, whether it be of something as small as a fly, فَمَا فَوْقَهَا, and anything above it. And this verse was revealed, different opinions as to exactly when. Some say it was after the examples that we're going to talk about today, about the munafiqeen that were revealed. And some say it was about other places in the Quran when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed examples that use spiders as symbols or mosquitoes and so on. In any case, it was revealed when the mushrikeen, the kuffar, they objected that why is Allah giving examples in the Quran? Why is He using things that are generally looked down upon, like mosquitoes and flies and spiders? Then why is He putting something like that in His book if His book is so great? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds that Allah does not shy away. Allah is not restricted to not using anything. He can give the example of something as minor as a fly, as a mosquito, until anything as large and massive and powerful as it may be. And then He says, فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, those who believe, فَيَعْلَمُونَ أَنَّهُ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّهِمْ, they know that it is the truth from Allah, that is coming from Allah. Allah knows why He uses the words and examples and symbolisms that he uses, we don't have the right or the need even to question that. However, on the other side, وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, those who disbelieve, فَيَقُولُونَ مَاذَا أَرَادَ اللَّهُ بِهَذَا مَثَلًا, that what is really the intent of Allah by giving this message? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes a very frightening statement about the Quran. He says, يُضِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرٌ وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا. Many people go astray through the Quran, and many are guided through the Quran. And then he clarifies, وَمَا يُضِلُّ بِهِ إِلَّا الْفَاسِقِينَ. Only those go astray through the Quran who are the fasiqeen, who are the sinners, for the lack of a better translation. Fasiq has many differences. In some contexts, fasiq means kafir, but generally fasiq refers to someone who consistently or habitually commits major sins. It has become a part of their life. They have normalized it and they carry it out on a daily basis. This person is a fasiq. And a person who is an open sinner, who commits sins in public, even if they may be minor, that person is also labeled as a fasiq in Sharia. So the point is here, وَمَا يُضِلُّ بِهِ إِلَّا الْفَاسِقِينَ, that the fasiqin are the one who go astray through it, is that those people who already have a perversion in their heart, when they're coming to the Quran already with a negative mindset, not seeking guidance, rather seeking to find faults, seeking to find mistakes that they think they can find. And it's really funny sometimes when you see someone trying to do that today. It's like, dude, you think for 1500 years, no one was able to find a mistake in the Quran. What are you going to do today? But still, people attempt, people try, and those are the people who go astray through the Quran. They will find something which to them seems like a contradiction, and they don't have the understanding to know why it is that way, why two seemingly exact same phrases in one place are written in one way, and one place like in another way. They say that's a mistake. But they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the background understanding of why it is how it is in different ways in different places. And this mindset is so powerful that even a non-Muslim who reads the Quran, if they read it with an open mind, it will lead them to guidance. But the same thing, if they read the Quran wanting to disprove it, find faults in it, it will move them further and further away from Islam. In most cases. There are cases when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed guidance for someone and they pick up the Quran or they make an attempt. There was this guy, I don't know his name, but he had a video. He's saying that I started writing a book against Muslims to, elucidate and once and for all make it clear how messed up they are. And he said, in that, I opened the Quran to read it. I opened the books of Hadith. And eventually he became Muslim through that. So some people Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to guide, they get their guidance. But in most cases, when someone approaches the Quran with that mindset, it becomes a means of them getting even further away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Getting to our parable of today, in verse number 17 of Surah Al-Baqara. Well, first, Surah Al-Baqarah starts, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about three different types of people. The first 4 or 5 verses are talking about believers, muttaqeen. The next 2 verses talk about kafirin. And then the next 13 verses talk about munafiqeen, hypocrites. These 2 examples are part of those verses that talk about the munafiqeen, the hypocrites. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مَثَلُهُمْ كَمَثَلِ الَّذِي اسْتَوْقَدَ نَارًا. Their example is like the one who ignites a fire. فَلَمَّا أَضَاءَتْ مَا حَوْلَهُ ذَهَبَ اللَّهُ بِنُورِهِمْ وَتَرَكَهُمْ فِي ظُلُمَاتٍ لَا يُبْصِرُونَ. When that fire is lit and it illuminates everything around, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removes their light and leaves them in a darkness where they cannot see. Summun bukmun umyun fahum la yarji'un. Deaf, blind, and mute, and they will not return. This is the first example given here. In fact, this is the first example given in the Quran, in the sequence of the Quran. And it refers to a type of munafiqeen who are very staunch in their nifaq, in their kufr. They are not those that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about when He says مُذَبْذَبِينَ بَيْنَ ذَلِكَ, where they are confused in between, they don't know which way to go, here or there. These are the people that are firmly rooted, they know what their belief is, and they are the worst kinds of munafiqeen. Allah says they're like the ones who light a fire. That fire is the example of Islam. And the example of one of these munafiqeen are in the presence of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba and the environment of the masjid and of Islam. There is some light there. When they hear the verses of the Quran, when they hear the teachings, the sayings of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, some light comes to them. They get a glimpse of maybe this is the truth. Maybe we need to accept this. They knew it was the truth, but maybe we should accept it, because the munafiqeen who were in Medina Munawwara, these were all the Jews who refused to accept Islam because Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not sent amongst them. That is the main thing that kept them away from accepting Islam. That pride, that jealousy, that why didn't he come from our forefathers, from our lineage? And because of that, when he became the leader of Medina Munawwara, the Ra'is al-Munafiqeen, Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul, he was the head of the Munafiqeen. He had the same reasoning in the back of his mind, but him more so, he was about to be named the leader, the king of Medina Munawwara. When he lost an opportunity because of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he developed that hatred for Islam. And he was the main munafiq of Medina Munawwara. And there were many, many others, dozens and dozens, if not more. In any case, they knew that Islam was the truth, but they had ulterior motives, reasons why they were not willing to accept. So when they would be with the Muslims, they would have this light. Just like a fire, when it is lit, it gives a light. But very quickly after, فَلَمَّا أَضَاءَتْ مَا حَوْلَهُ, as soon as it lights up what is around it. And you can think when you light a candle, how much time does it take for the light to start to spread? Maybe a second, 2 seconds. Right when that happens, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removes their light. ذَهَبَ اللَّهُ بِنُورِهِمْ, and leaves them in a darkness where they cannot see. This removal of the light is them being sent back into their nifaq, into their kufr. Where now again, where before they had a short glimpse of maybe we should accept it, now they are back to their staunch stance that no, we will not do this. Allah says that they have been labeled, branded with summun bukmun umyun, deaf, blind, mute. They are not going to come back. This type, like we said, is referring to the most staunch, severe types of munafiqeen. In the next verses, and because this is referring to that type of munafiqeen, unless someone is a munafiq of that level, this verse will not apply to them in any way. But it is to tell us what type of mindset the munafiqeen have. Now, locally here in places like Canada, the concept of nifaq doesn't really exist. Because nifaq, a person comes forward as a hypocrite when they're living in an Islamic society, and because of them not being a Muslim, there is some disadvantage to them. Here, in most cases, being a Muslim is a disadvantage to you. But munafiqeen exist even today in Muslim countries. And they express themselves as Muslims to get that benefit. And this became very evident after 9/11, when you had people in different Muslim countries openly speaking up against Muslims and doing everything they can to distance themselves from the rest of the Muslims. And eventually, when people investigated, these are our people. Why are they speaking so much against us? It became known that no, in fact, these people are not really Muslims. So they exist even today, people like this. Anyways, the next verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "O kasayyibin min as-sama," or their example is like a rainfall from the sky. "Fihi dhulumatun wa ra'dun wa barq." In it is darkness and lightning and thunder. It's a storm. يَجْعَلُونَ أَصَابِعَهُمْ فِي آذَانِهِمْ مِنَ الصَّوَاعِقِ حَذَرَ الْمَوْتِ. They place their fingers in their ears out of fear of death because of the thunder. وَاللَّهُ مُحِيطٌ بِالْكَافِرِينَ. Allah encompasses the disbelievers. So, yes, and sorry, one thing I forgot to mention about the previous example. Those munafiqeen, when they see the light and they go back to it, Allah gives this example in this way because when you're in the dark, to begin with, you can see a bit. Right? Your eyes have accustomed to the darkness. But when the light turns on, and when it turns off again, what happens? It's pitch black, complete darkness. You can't see anything. So every time they make this resolve that we're going to stay in our faith, they fall deeper and deeper into their nifaq, into their kufr. And some of Mufassirin, they have mentioned that this example is like the one who was able to see and then became blind. That what they lose through that transition, no one else can imagine. It's not like someone who was born blind. So it's a very eloquent way of demonstrating how deep and how lost these people truly are. Okay, coming back to our second example of the storm, these people place their fingers in their ear out of fear of death because of the thunder. يكاد البرق يخطف أبصارهم كلما أضاء لهم مشوا فيه. The thunder and lightning is such that it almost makes them blind. It's that strong. But كلما أضاء لهم, every time it lights up, like when you see a thunderstorm, and for that split second, it looks like it's daytime. And then it goes back. Every time it lights up, they walk in it. مشوا فيه. وإذا أظلم عليهم قاموا. When it becomes dark, they stand again, they stop. وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَذَهَبَ بِسَمْعِهِمْ وَأَبْصَارِهِمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. If Allah wants, He could have removed their sight and their hearing as well, and Allah is able to do all things. This example is of the second type of munafiqeen, of those who are not so severely rooted in their kufr. They are in a state of confusion. In the storm, the rainfall that is coming down, that is the example of the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But these people, the rahmah and the mercy and the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but these people are such that they disregard the rain, and it's mentioned in some books of tafsir that this example is referring to people who are in a desert and they don't have anything around them. And the rain comes. But instead of realizing and being thankful for the rain, they focus on the bad. That, oh, there's thunder and lightning as well. So the munafiq, because of their state of confusion, when they hear the teachings of Sharia, the teachings of Quran and Hadith, they're not sure what to do. They know there's good in there, but their mind is such that they only focus on what they see as bad. Oh, there are these commandments, there are these prohibitions. So when it seems easy for them, like when the path lights up from the lightning, they move forward. But when that's not the case, when it's back to darkness, they stand still. So this is the case of, sadly, many Muslims today who are Muslims, maybe even practicing to a certain degree, but they don't have that level of conviction in the teachings of Quran and Hadith. They very often give preference to their own understandings, their own conclusions, their own logic. That, okay, Quran is saying this, but this makes more sense to me to do it this way. I know that Islam says to do this, but how about we tweak it a little bit for the 21st century? That makes more sense today. There are countless people like this. There are countless influential people out there in the world who are constantly making an attempt to redefine Sharia, redefine Islam based on their understandings. And that, to be daring and willing to do that in itself, is a sign that this person does not have full conviction in Islam. They are in that state of confusion. What seems appropriate to them, what path lights up, they move forward in it. They implement it, they practice it. But as soon as that element is lost, they say, no, wait a minute. I can't go into this. I can't do this. So our job, the demand from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to us as Muslims is to be just that, to be Muslims. A Muslim is someone who submits. We all know this. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants full submission. Udkhulu fi silmi kaffa. Submit completely. And any time when a person tries to justify, well, for one, it's a very dangerous thing to try and justify something that is haram in Sharia, to make it permissible. Because the second you deem something permissible that Allah in the Quran has made impermissible, you are out of the fold of Islam. And vice versa. So for one, it's a very dangerous path to tread. But our job as Muslims is to submit, to know. It starts with knowing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us, how we can implement that in our lives, and we put our own thoughts, our own opinions on the back burner. Right? And the biggest proof, as an example, of that people who try to present their logic against Islamic teachings, the biggest proof that they are just following their desires and they are nitpicking of when to do what and how to do it, is that they don't object to everything. Tell me, is there anything logical about praying 2 rakat Fajr, 4 Dhuhr, 4 Asr, 3 Maghrib, 4 Isha? Is there any logic, any pattern, anything to it? Is there anything logical about paying 2.5% zakat? Is there anything logical about doing tawaf of the Kaaba 7 times? There isn't. That's because our Islam is not based on logic. It doesn't matter what logic says. It matters what Allah and His Rasul say. So when people try to object and say, this part of Sharia needs to be changed to adapt to modern times because it doesn't follow logic, it doesn't make sense, that they're not making any sense. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to truly submit to Him and to worship Him and to carry out His ibadat, His worships, as He has asked us, especially through this blessed month. Anyone who perhaps may have had some misconception about some element of Islam, some element of Sharia, let this month be a means of this person turning back to Allah, making tawbah, and making a firm resolve to spend the rest of their lives according to the teaching that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Jazakumullahu khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.